This summer, when you're on the go, stay connected to what matters most with access to over 3 million Cox Wi-Fi hotspots. Learn more at Cox.com.
Ask Ashley the podcast is sponsored by Cox.
Mary redeemed a $50,000 cash prize playing Chumba Casino online.
I was only playing for fun, so winning was a dream come true.
Chumba Casino is America's favorite free online social casino. You too could have the chance to win life-changing cash prizes. Absolutely anybody could be like Mary. Be like Mary. Log on to ChumbaCasino.com and play for free now. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply. See website for details. The voice in the preceding commercial was not the actual voice of the winner.
Everybody thinks they got it together. But inside, you're asking, am I enough? No matter how good we look to others, the nagging voice of self-doubt is hard to shake. We ask questions like, if people really knew me, would they still accept me? Will I be rejected when I can't perform? Can I pull this off? What if I end up alone? Am I missing out on what life should be? Because I just can't shake this fear. My guest on Unscripted today is Erica Wiggenhorn. Erica is an award-winning author and founder of Every Life Ministries. Every Life Ministries encourages you to discover your unique purpose, accept God's promises, and live by his power. Erica is the author of 3 Bible studies: An Unexplainable Life, The Unexplainable Church, and Unexplainable Jesus. Her next release, Letting God Be Enough, is scheduled to be released in September 2021. Would you help me in welcoming my guest and new friend, Erica Wiggenhorn?
Welcome to the Unscripted podcast. My name's Corby LaCroix, and the song you're hearing right now is called Great and Mighty One, available on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your music. But for now, recording from the Unscripted studio at the Junction in Old Hilliard, here's your host and my friend, Aaron Conrad.
Great Redeemer, God of grace.
All right, everybody, welcome to Unscripted from my studio at the Junction in Old Hilliard. Corby, thank you for my introduction, as always, on the audio. And really cool, just a very special guest today. This opportunity, I'm just so honored that it came up. And I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Erica and let her introduce herself. So, Erica, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
Hey, everybody. It's great to be with you today. My name is Erica Wiggenhorn, and I'm super excited to be on Unscripted because it feels very no pressure here, Aaron. Like, I just feel like I'm hanging out with a cool guy, and yeah, we're just kind of chatting it up. But I am first and foremost a follower of Jesus, and I am a wife and a mother of 2 teenagers. So if you are a praying person, you know how to pray for me now. I'm an author. My jam, the passion of my life, is to convince you to get your face in the book, which I mean the Bible. Get your face in the book and live like it's true, because it will change everything for you. So I write Bible studies. I teach at various conferences. And I have a new book out that just came out 2 days ago. I don't know. It's kind of a blur.
Right.
And yeah, I'm just excited to be here. And anytime I can encourage somebody to pause and think about how much God loves them and that he created them for a purpose, it's a great day.
That's awesome. Thank you for that introduction. And you're in Arizona, right? So
yes.
we had a little lesson in time zones this week. All of us did, both myself and Erica. So here we are, but we made it happen, and I'm super pumped and honored that you're here with us now. So can we start at the beginning? You said you've written 3 devotional books so far, and then now your 4th is just now coming out. Is my math correct?
That is correct. You are
Awesome.
Much better at math than you are at time zones, Aaron. Good job.
Exactly. Perfect. And those that know me, I've been told not to say this a lot, but I got a 13 on my ACT. So that for me, 4 is probably about as the highest number I can go. So that's good. So, all right. So you have 3 books, 4th coming out now. When did you decide to write your first book? And we can talk about those 3 books, because I really want to get into the new book that you're launching. But the first 3 books, what pushed you to write book number 1, and then book number 2, and then book number 3?
Yeah. So book number 1 really came about for a couple of different reasons. I did not grow up in church at all. I'm not familiar with the Sunday school flannel boards that I hear people talk about. That was not my story. But my grandparents moved in with us when I was a young teen. And if you knew my grandfather, you knew there was absolutely no way you were going to live under his roof and not be in church on a Sunday morning. So we started going to church because Papa said, you better go to church. And that was really my first experience of being in a church much, ever reading a Bible, really. And so my youth pastor began really working on me. I think I was his project, but anyway, after about a year and a half, I decided to follow Jesus. And when that happened, he said to me, okay, well, if you're going to follow Jesus, then you need to have a quiet time. And I'm like, what in the world is quiet time? He's like, well, you need to read your Bible, and you need to let God speak to you through the Bible, and you need to pray. And I was like, okay, I don't know how to do that, but I'll give it a shot. So, he gave me one of those nifty Bibles where everything Jesus says is in red letters.
Nice.
And I sat on my bed and opened my Bible, and I'm reading Jesus's red letters. And I'm thinking, well, I don't know what a millstone is. I don't know what a plowshare is, a wheat tare, a mustard seed, an oxen. I don't know what any of these things are. And I remember sitting there and saying to Jesus, how in the world am I supposed to follow you if I can't even understand you?
True.
And so my Bible just pretty much sat on my nightstand and collected dust, and I'd pick it up on a Sunday morning when I went to church. And that was pretty much all I ever read my Bible, because I felt like it was boring and I didn't know how to apply it to my life. And I was super embarrassed to admit that, because nobody wants to admit that I love Jesus, but I don't like reading my Bible. It's like an oxymoron, right?
Right.
And so then I would go to church and I would hear people talking about, how God would speak to them in their quiet time. And I was like, really? Like, God doesn't speak to me when I try to read the Bible. I don't know what you're talking about. And then I felt really ashamed. Like I wasn't a good Christian, or God must not really love me the way he loves other people. Just lots of things like that went through my mind. And I pretty much cycled in that guilt because I didn't like reading the Bible, and then ashamed because I was frustrated when I did read it, for probably a good solid 10 years of my life, honestly. And I was going to church still, and I was, trying to be a good Christian and do all the things, but connecting with God was just hard for me. I knew he existed. I believed in him. I believed Jesus had died on the cross for my sins, but I didn't really have a relationship with God. I just sort of was like, okay, well, when I die, he'll take me to heaven. And that was pretty much the extent of it.
Yeah.
And then finally, I had the opportunity to go to a Bible study at church. And I went kicking and screaming because I did not want anyone to know how little I actually knew of the Bible. Like, this is going to be the truth telling moment. Right. So, but I went, my friend was like, nope, you're going. And I went and I sat around a table of women, and they began to teach me how to study the Bible. And it came alive for me. Something finally clicked. The light bulb finally went on. I began to understand more of what I was reading. And at that point in my life, I thought to myself, man, if I could have had some kind of resource, if somebody could have just come alongside me so much sooner than now, or I could have had some kind of book or study to to walk me through this process and help me learn the Bible, my life would have been so different.
Right.
And so that really became the catalyst of me wanting to write studies. I wanted to create a tool that somebody could pick up and say, I get it. Okay,
Yeah.
now I understand it. And so when I get an email from a reader and they're like, for the first time in my life, I understand the Bible.
Right.
I just want to like jump out of my desk chair.
Right.
Because I get that moment of like, yes, I know, it's exciting, right? Somebody gave you the secret decoder ring.
Right.
And it's the coolest thing. And so that's really what led me to begin that process, is I just wanted to create those tools for people, because I realized over quite some time I was not alone in that struggle of feeling like I don't understand the Bible. I don't understand how it applies to my life. I don't want to admit that I don't like reading it. I don't want to admit that when I do read it, I don't understand it or get anything out of it. There's a lot of people out there in that boat. But nobody talks about it because nobody wants to admit it. But the reality is that's a lot of people that are walking in and out of church, or even people that maybe don't go to church, but they have a Bible somewhere in their house, but they don't ever read it. So yeah, that's kind of how I got started on my journey.
I love that. And can I ask you this question? What version? Because to your point, if I go to the Christian bookstore right now, there's probably 5 to 6 to 10. I don't even know how many versions there are now. There's the NIV, the King James, the New King James, the King James Remix, the King James 2.0, the New Living Translation, the Message, right? ESV, whatever, you name it. What version do you use?
Well, that's sort of a trick question. So my very my very first Bible was NIV, and that's kind of my fallback version. I think you kind of always just sort of have an affinity for wherever you started. But in publishing world, you can't use NIV in published books. And so for my Bible studies that are published, I use ESV, which is so super similar to the NIV. But that particular version publishers are allowed to use in their published works. So ESV is my second go-to.
It's just completely off base and random. And it, by the way, if I ever ask a question you can't answer for publishing reasons or whatever other reasons, you just say pass.
Okay.
Why can't you use NIV? Is it because somebody else owns it?
I don't know. They just won't grant publishers the right to use it. I don't know.
Fine. I think I know the answer to that, and I think it starts with a Z, the name of the company. But anyway, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. That's fine. This is fine. Anyway, so use the ESV.
I don't know. I mean, who doesn't want people to read the Bible?
Right. So I think that's why we have so many versions, right? You have the Message, and you have all those things, and I think there's theologians sitting around trying to come up with new and different ways to explain this and decoder ring, as you said it. And because of that, you've written 3 books, and they're all, I have my notes in front of me. Can you read the 3 books for me while I look for it on this piece? I know they're all called The Unexplained. I got it. The Unexplained Life, The Unexplained Church, and the Unexplainable Life. Let me get it right, Aaron. The Unexplainable Life, The Unexplainable Church, and Unexplainable Jesus. Those are the first 3, right? Yes. And so that was and in those, I don't want to speak for you, that was how you began to decode this for someone like the rest of us, like myself, that would admit the same thing. I'm afraid to go to a Bible study if I don't have tabs on the side, because I don't have it memorized yet where they are in the, I mean, I think I was sick the day they had VBS. So I didn't know.
Right. Yeah.
I know Revelation's in the back. I know Genesis is in the front, and the Gospels are somewhere in the middle. And if I open it straight to the middle, I'll probably get to Psalms. And outside of that, I'm struggle bus. So is that kind of that?
Tabs for you, Aaron, by the way.
Thank you. For guys like me, right? That's perfect. No, so the 3 books, that's really the basis of those 3 books.
Yes. So the first 2, An Unexplainable Life and The Unexplainable Church, really walk you through the book of Acts, which is, hey, how did the people who walked around on this earth with Jesus, how did they do the Jesus thing? How did they live? What did they think it meant to be a follower of Jesus? And so it really walks us through that. And it walks us through God's call really to live in community. And that really goes very counterculture to the culture that we're living in now, and even very counterculture to the current American church culture, right? Like, I'm going to church if I'm logging into my YouTube and I'm watching a sermon on my phone. I did church. No, you watched a sermon, but you didn't do church, because church is being in community with other believers and serving other believers and letting other believers speak into your life and challenging you and encouraging you. So it really gives us what I would say, it gives us the recipe for how to live the Christian life. How do we follow Jesus today in our world, in our time? So that's the first two. And then the third one, Unexplainable Jesus, Rediscovering the God You Thought You Knew, that goes through the Gospel of Luke. And it really explains Jesus from the Jewish perspective. So instead of reading the Gospels, all those nice red letters in your Bible, like a 21st century American, it helps you hear what those words of Jesus would have sounded like and felt like to a first century Israelite. So it's the secret decoder ring for when Jesus is using irony or sarcasm or calling people out, right? Like, Jesus was not the guy who walked around like patting kids' heads with the little lamb across his shoulders and peace to you, shalom, have a blessed day. I mean, that was not Jesus. Like, he was funny and he called people out and he got in their face when they were hypocritical. I mean, we miss it. We miss so much of it because we read it like an American instead of like someone from Middle Eastern culture.
I love that, because I want to hang out with somebody who's sarcastic and ironic and funny and all those things much more than, you know what I mean? To your point. I love that. I love that. I really, really do. It's very cool. All right. So that brings us to the new book, and that is Letting God Be Enough. You want me to read the whole title? Shall I read the whole? I'll read the whole title.
Letting God Be Enough. I kind of want to hear you struggle through it.
We've known each other like 5 minutes, and you already know I'm not going to be good at that. Letting God Be Enough. Why striving keeps you stuck and how surrender sets you free. Did I get it right?
Good. Bravo.
Right. Anyway, that's the new book. Letting God Be Enough. Why striving keeps you stuck and how surrender sets you free. So let's talk about the new book. It just launched, and I'll have all the links and all this, and we'll get them before we're done. But let's talk about the new book.
Yeah. So the new book is topical in nature, and it really is about imposter syndrome and overcoming our fear of inadequacy, fear of failure, fear of not being enough, fear of messing up, all those self-doubts that we can struggle with in such a variety of contexts. I know, like for my husband, for example, that really shows up a lot in his career in that area of his life.
Yep.
You know, am I going to succeed? Am I going to, you know, leave the legacy that I want? Am I going to achieve my goals that I've set for myself? Or is, you know, somebody going to come in and pass me right up or take the opportunity from me? I think for women, it can definitely show up in a workplace as well. But I think for women, where we predominantly struggle with it more is in our relationships, right? So, you know, maybe we have aging parents and it's like, well, you know, am I enough to handle my parents' aging and illnesses well? Can I navigate this? Am I doing enough for my kids? You know, are they going to end up in therapy because I'm a terrible mom? You know, am I being a good enough wife? You know, is my husband going to decide he needs somebody else at someday because I'm not, you know, I'm just not enough for him? Am I a good enough friend? You know, those are the areas more where I think women really begin to struggle with it. But I think women also struggle with it in the sense of we have a lot of roles and a lot of hats that we wear. And so for a guy, you know, if somebody were to come over to our house and our house looks like a bomb went off, which it kind of does right now. But if someone were to come over, you know, I just launched a book 2 days ago. That's my excuse.
That's right.
If someone were to come over to our house and it looked like a bomb went off, the cultural instinct is not to say, wow, that Jonathan that Erica is married to is like a slouch of a husband.
Mm-hmm.
The culture is going to say, like, Erica really needs to get her act together. I mean, her house looks like a bomb went off. Like, culturally, it just sort of lands on the woman.
Right.
If the children are not doing well in school, you know, again, it's like, where's the mom? Why is she not paying attention? Why is she not signing these missing homework slips? You know, it falls more on the female. And that's just a part of the way that our culture is. And so I think women especially struggle with it because it can come at them from so many different angles, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if my husband is knocking it out of the park at work, he's feeling pretty good all the way around. But for a woman, it's like she's got to be doing a good job at work, and she's got to be keeping her home up, and she's got to have kids that are on the right track, and she's got to have time for friends, and she's got to, you know, have some kind of like side hustle, and her hair needs to be combed, and she needs to, you know, go to the gym 3 days a week. There's just a whole lot more cultural pressure for women to be all things all the time.
True. Mm-hmm. Very true. And I think, I absolutely agree. And I think all that's very, very fair. And I guess I've never thought of it in that perspective of the home, you know, like you just said, if somebody comes to the house, you know, it's not like they ask me why I haven't, unless the landscaping, yes. You know, I mean, if the inside of the house is a mess, they're probably not going to say, hey, how come you haven't vacuumed? Or, you know what I mean? Like, I think that's very fair. But I will say it from the male perspective. I think when I read these questions before we got on, I think all these questions, I'm an empath by nature, just so you know. I'm an empath. Okay. So I feel and do all those things. And when I read these, I think for males, the difference is we won't admit it. And I don't know if that's fair or if that's true, but I think a lot of guys are not. These thoughts run through our head as well, and but we just won't admit it, and we won't admit it publicly, which is, I think, why guys get themselves in situations, much like you mentioned a minute ago, because we won't admit our need for, I don't know if I'm good. I don't know if I'm going to be good enough at what I'm going to try. You know, I don't know if I'm going to be good enough at work. All those things that you said, like, I think maybe we just don't admit it as much, or are afraid to admit it, or get into accountability groups with other people that will help us when we do admit it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You ready for some questions? Because there's some quotes in the book. I want you to unpack for me. Can you do that?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to try. This is unscripted, so right. No promises.
Well, I'm going to try to read them. So we're both in the same boat. All right. And I highlighted them, and my printer smeared them. So I'm making up all kinds of excuses. Anyway, all right. Our fear of inadequacy and failure can bring us into battles God never intended us to fight. Can you talk about that one for a minute?
Yeah. So I think what happens is, you know, we are seeing this so much in our culture right now. You know, people are so offended over some of the smallest things. And, you know, maybe why are we offended? Right. You know, one of the things my dad used to say to me, you know, if someone were to say something hurtful, you know, he used to always say, Erica, consider the source.
Yep. 100%.
Consider the source. Right. So it's
right.
like, you know, one of the things, you know, I've been involved in women's ministry at our church for many years. And I will say to other women, I'll say, you know, wounded women wound women. Mm-hmm. You know, when somebody says something that is hurtful or offensive, usually it's coming from a place of their own woundedness, right? And so that's just coming out and it's just spilling over onto us. And that's not a battle we need to fight, right? Like, they're wounded, they need healing. Like, it has nothing to do with you or I, the recipient of those words or those actions. And so I think, but because if we are battling already with insecurity, when somebody says something hurtful to us, it just sort of rips the mask off of our face a little bit, because it's like, oh my goodness, like, they've just said out loud what I am secretly feeling about myself inside. And so then it, even though what they're saying isn't true, because what we're feeling is a feeling, it's not necessarily reality. And so, you know, feelings are indicators, but they shouldn't be leaders of how we respond, right? Our logic should be the leader in how we respond. And so, yeah, what happens is we end up reacting emotionally to things that, if we were more secure in who we are, we wouldn't have such a visceral, angry response when somebody says something unkind to us or does something unkind to us. We would just say, well, you know what, that person must have really had something hard happen in their life for them to behave like that.
Yeah, that's all so true. And I used to say the same thing. I've always believed that if someone is saying something about you, then you're a threat. They see you as a threat. First, whether that's a threat of, whether it's in business or in sports or in just overall presence, it's almost a compliment if we can learn to live in a place where take that as a compliment, because honestly, if they weren't saying anything at you, they wouldn't really probably even realize that you're existing. You know what I mean? You're a threat of some kind. So that's always been my mentality. An inability to offer grace to others is the first sign that we remain unable to accept grace for ourselves. Wow. Can you talk about that one?
Sure. Yeah.
Right. We might need a whole nother episode for this one. That's why I picked it. But
so I don't know if you've ever met any of these people or you've ever gone to a church where these people are, but there are some people. I mean, I don't have any of these people in my church, but there are those people that are very, they're always pointing a finger out the window and they're never looking in the mirror.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're very quick to judge the slightest thing in someone else, but yet they are completely unwilling to take a look in the mirror and see their own shortcomings. That is a person who thinks that they are righteous, they are holy, they don't really need God's grace. They don't make mistakes the way other people do. They're smarter than other people. They're wiser than other people, right? We meet this person in Luke's gospel, in Luke 7. It starts in verse 35, and it's a Pharisee, and his name is Simon. And Simon, Jesus shows up to Simon's house, and Simon completely humiliates Jesus in the way that he treats him. He doesn't greet him. He doesn't wash his feet or give him water to wash his feet. He doesn't anoint Jesus with oil, which are all like, regular customs. Like, it'd be like if you showed up at my house, Aaron, and I just like left the door unlocked and you walked in and I just totally ignored you. I didn't offer you anything to drink. Like, Simon's totally rude to Jesus. And then as the story goes on, there is this woman that Simon thinks is a sinner, and she does all of those things for Jesus. She washes Jesus's feet with her tears as she's weeping over him. She anoints him with the little tiny bit of oil that she has, and she's kissing his feet. She's just adoring him. And Simon is appalled at this woman's behavior, and her behavior was a little risque for that culture. I mean, women didn't let down their hair, so it was a little odd what this woman was doing, but she was doing it from a heart of love.
Mhm.
And Jesus basically tells Simon a story. He's like, look, Simon, if one guy owes me $50 million and one guy owes me 50 cents, and I tell both guys they don't have to pay me back, which one's going to be more grateful?
Right.
And Simon's like, well, the one who owed you $50 million, I suppose. And Jesus is kind of like, well, no, duh. Right. And he's not saying to Simon, like, aren't you lucky that you only have a debt of 50 cents?
Right.
Jesus is like using irony. He's like, you think you have a debt of 50 cents. You think you're all that and a bag of chips, and you don't need my forgiveness.
Right.
But this woman who's weeping over me recognizes her own sin, and she's sorry for it. And she wants to show me that she's grateful that I have forgiven her sins.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing. It's like the person who's always so busy looking around thinking that they have, all they need to throw on the table is 2 quarters, compared to the person who's like, you know what, without Jesus, I'm lost.
Right.
I am a wreck. They're not going to be very willing to offer grace to anyone else. But the person who knows, without Jesus, man, I would be a complete and utter disaster.
Right.
That is a person who's going to be much more compassionate and kind and gracious to somebody else.
Wow. We literally could have a whole episode on that, I do believe. So we'll have to come back and do another episode. But, I think as you were talking, I was thinking about, we have a prison ministry at our church, and the stories that come out of the prison ministry, to your point, are people that have been absolutely broken, have hit rock bottom for whatever reason, whether it was life choices or circumstance, whatever it was. And they understand a grace and I always think of it when I go to the ocean, and there's a song called "What Do I Know of Holy?" and I stand on the ocean and I think of the words, I always think of that lyric when I stand in Outer Banks and look out at the ocean, like, what do I know of holy? You know what I mean? And I think people, much like you're speaking of, who've been to the brink, know a whole lot more about holy than I do when I live a privileged life. I mean, just the honest truth. So awesome answer. I promise this is unscripted. She doesn't know what's coming next. All right. One more. Asking for help requires a different type of strength, vulnerability.
Yeah. It's scary to be vulnerable.
Right.
Would you agree? I mean,
would absolutely agree.
In fact, I think it's almost more frightening sometimes to be vulnerable than it is to be courageous and just say, I don't know how this is going to work, but I'm going to strive and I'm going to give it 199%. And I'm going to do everything I possibly can not to fail. And, regardless of the fallout, regardless of the collateral damage, I'm going for it. That requires courage too. But to sit down and look around and say, I can't do this by myself. This is bigger than me. I need other people. And most importantly, I need God. That is vulnerability. And that takes a courage that, first of all, it's a courage that our culture despises, right? Our culture teaches us, like, the minute you admit that, like, the whole world is going to come at you, chew you up and spit you out, right? So we are trained to keep our vulnerability under wraps at all costs. But the reality is that's really the message of the gospel, right? Like Paul said, we don't consider anything as coming from ourselves, but it's Christ who's made us adequate through his death and resurrection. And so, that's essentially what it means to follow Jesus, to say, I don't have everything. I don't have it all figured out. I'm not living this life perfectly. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've got a lot of questions. I've got a lot of doubts. There's a lot about this life that doesn't make sense, that I can't wrap my mind around, that I can't explain away. And I need to believe that there's somebody bigger and better than me out there behind all of this, that's got a plan and that's got a purpose. And I know I can't fix it all. I can't fix myself. I can't fix the prodigal that's walked away and is, living a horrible life of self-destruction. I can't cure my family member that has cancer. I can't fix my kid with special needs. I can love them to death, but I can't cure them. I can't fix the mind that doesn't work the same way as everybody else's. There's stuff in this life I can't fix. And I need God to help me. I need God to be enough where I am falling short. That's vulnerability, and that's courage.
I mean, all of these are so deep and true. I mean, everything you're saying is truth. It's an uncomfortable truth because it's something we don't want to admit. We want to be able to pull us up by our own bootstraps and talk about how we did it. I created, when the reality is we have zero control. I mean, we found that out in the last year.
Sure.
Right. I mean, like within the last, 2020 was, if we didn't learn in 2020 that we really have zero control over a lot. And that's there's a lot of conversation that could go off of that too. But honestly, I mean, things were stripped away and we had no control. We had zero control. And for some of us, it helped us learn, I don't have control. So I just got to roll with the punches and see where it goes. And and in some ways we were almost forced into a vulnerability, but I failed to mention the fact this book is based on Moses, correct?
That is correct. Yes.
I remember that because his brother was helpful. No, I do remember that. No,
Aaron was awesome.
He was awesome.
And I'm really glad I can see, for those of you listening out here, I just want you to know that I can see Aaron's office behind him. And you will be very relieved to know that there is not a golden cow anywhere in sight.
No, there's some bobbleheads, but no, there's not a cow up there. Not a single golden cow up there. No, in all honesty,
he's learned his lesson.
Complete offshoot. But when I was growing up, I was one of the few Aarons. So we would go to the amusement park, and there was always license plates with people's names on them, and you could never find Aaron. Completely random. But that point, when I was reading this, I was thinking, that's interesting because Aaron's been around since the beginning of time, and yet I couldn't get a license plate when I went to the gift shop. But the point is not that. The point is that the story is a drawing up. Let's get back. I'm so sorry. We'll get back on track. The story is, you spoke about this with your other books, and how those were written, from certain chapters and in the Bible, and certain books of the Bible, I should say. And this one, you're drawing the story from Moses. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what specifically drew you to that? How did you go from Moses to the title of Letting God Be Enough?
Yeah. How do you connect those dots? So in Moses's journey, what I found so fascinating when I wanted to really study this whole idea of not being enough, imposter syndrome, fear of inadequacy, self-doubt, all different ways of saying the exact same thing. Because my passion really is scripture, I looked at two things. I looked at what the world tells us when we struggle with this, what do leading psychologists tell us to do, thought leaders, influencers. Their advice is to unroll your resume, cite your past successes, look yourself in the mirror, tell yourself all the reasons why you're enough, all the good things about yourself, give yourself a nice, good pep talk, get your head back in reality of who you really are, what you've been able to accomplish and do in your life. And that's not bad advice, because our default is to always downplay our abilities and our giftedness. I mean, that's just what we do.
Amen.
And that doesn't honor God. You know, that's like basically saying, well, God, you say I'm this, but what do you know, God? Like, I know more about myself than you do. That's not healthy. That's not honoring. So it's not bad advice. The problem is it's inadequate advice to overcome a fear of inadequacy, because there will be times, there's going to be seasons in our lives where we're going to walk into a situation or an assignment and we have nothing on our resume to prepare us for that. You know, my husband's coworker, she walked into the office a couple of months ago and announced to everybody, my 11-year-old daughter has bone cancer. Well, Rachel is an amazing woman. She has a graduate degree. She's run $1 million businesses. I mean, this girl's got it going on. She is smart as a whip. But there's nothing on Rachel's resume to prepare her to be a mom of a cancer patient.
Right.
So the advice becomes inadequate, because there's going to be things we're going to face in this life that we've got nothing to prepare us for that moment. And so, I coupled, okay, well, this is the world's advice. It's not bad advice, but it's not adequate advice.
Right.
To help me overcome my fear of inadequacy. So what does scripture say? And I landed on Moses because I call him the greatest self-doubter of the Bible, because essentially that's what he did to God when God came to him, in the burning bush. And he's like, okay, Moses, so I'm God and you're not, clearly. So take off your sandals because you need to figure out I'm holy, you're not. Right. And I'm going to tell you some stuff. I'm going to tell you my plan for your life, Moses, and what I want you to do. And Moses is like, I don't think so. Like, who am I to have that plan for my life? Right. God, like, you're making a mistake, right? That's essentially what Moses is saying to God. And in that moment, God does not do with Moses what the world tells us to do. He doesn't unroll Moses's resume and cite all of the reasons why. Here's the reason why, Moses, I picked you as the guy for the job. I mean, God could have done that. He could have said, okay, well, I picked you to go back to Egypt to talk to Pharaoh because you grew up in Pharaoh's court. So like, you get how the whole court works, when to walk in, when to walk out, when you can speak, when you can't. You speak fluent Egyptian, that's probably going to be helpful. You understand their religion, so you're going to know why I'm doing these plagues. Like, that's all going to make sense to you. You grew up as a prince, so you understand government because you're going to be in charge of 2 million people. You've been wandering around this wilderness for 40 years, so you know all the best places to stop along the way once you get out. I mean, God could have unrolled Moses's resume and cited all of the reasons why he was qualified for this assignment. And you kind of think to yourself, well, man, like, that would have kind of been nice of you, God. I mean, clearly he's struggling with self-doubt here.
Right.
Like, you could have given him some props, right?
Right.
But God didn't do it. He doesn't give Moses one single prop. He just promises Moses his presence. And he just is like, Moses, you got to get your eyes off yourself, man. Like, this isn't about you, dude. This isn't about what you've done, where you've been, what you learned. This is about me. This is about the fact that I'm God and I'm with you and I have the plan and I'm going to finish the plan, because God then goes on to say to Moses, and I love this part, he says, I will be with you. And then he says, when you lead the people out. And I love that, because he didn't say to Moses, well, I will be with you, and if you are spiritual enough to hear my voice and understand what I'm doing, or if you are obedient enough and I decide to keep blessing this plan, or if you are wise enough and a strong enough leader to convince everybody to follow you. God doesn't say if, he says when, because God's plan for our lives it really doesn't depend on our performance.
Right.
It rests on God's promises.
Thank God.
And God, right? And God's promises are yes and amen, right?
Mhm.
They are good as done. And so I take so much comfort in that, because God is basically saying, like, okay, Moses, here's the deal. I'm going to go with you. I'm going to finish what I start, because God is the author and the finisher. He always finishes what he starts.
Mhm.
And then the third one, he says, I will be with you. And when you lead the people out, and then he says, you will worship me on this mountain. Or some translations say, serve me.
Mhm.
Essentially, it means the same thing. What God is saying is, and Moses, through this process of you walking this assignment out with me, you will understand that I am a God worthy to be worshiped or worthy to be served. In other words, he's promising Moses a level of intimacy. You're going to witness some wonders here, Moses. You're going to see the greatness of my capabilities, but you're also going to understand the goodness and the kindness and the faithfulness of my character. So you're going to understand not only what I can do, but you're going to understand who I am. And that excites me.
Yeah.
Because but it also gives me comfort, because when I'm in a difficult situation or a difficult season, and I'm looking in the mirror and I'm going, this girl ain't got nothing for this.
Right.
I don't have to have anything. I just have to say, God, I'm following you. I don't know where you're going. I don't know how this is all going to work, but I'm going to follow you. And God promises me those three things. We can say no, God's still with us. We can say no, God's still going to work out his plan for our lives. But what we'll forfeit is the intimacy part. We're going to forfeit the opportunity to witness some real wonders of God and to experience the kindness, the goodness, the love, the compassion, the mercy, the faithfulness of his character. We're going to forfeit that, because we're basically going to say, okay, God, like, whatever, you do your thing. You do you, God. I'm over here. I'm doing me.
Yeah.
I'll meet you at the gates after I die. Right.
Right.
So we're going to forfeit really the most awesome parts of following God if we choose to say, nope, not me. I'm going back to Midian. Peace out. Send Aaron, my brother.
See, I was going to say preach, because seriously, you're just preaching the word right now. It's pretty. This has been amazing, honestly. Just amazing, and I mean, I'm blown away. I feel like we've given hopefully a lot of insight into not just this book, but also the other ones as well. And I'm just so thankful for your time. But before we leave, where do I get it? So I always say this, if I'm driving down the road, because most people, I think when they listen to a podcast, they're either walking their dog, or they're working out, or they're on their treadmill, or they're on their way to work, or on their way home from work, or maybe a little bit both. So if I'm driving, walking, running, whatever it might be, how do I find the book? What's the easiest way for me to find your resources?
Yeah. So if you go to my website, ericawiggenhorn.com, there'll be links on there where you can purchase the book. You can get it pretty much anywhere. If you have a local Christian bookstore in your community, please buy it there. Support your local Christian bookstore. But you can get it all the places: Barnes and Noble, Christian Discount Book, Books A Million. You can even order it from Target or Walmart. And of course, the almighty Amazon.
That's right. All right. And I will have a link as well in the podcast if anybody wants to find it after the fact. But that seems like the easiest way to do that. You also mentioned speaking. So do you tour and speak?
I do. Yes.
Okay.
I like to do women's retreats, women's conferences. Generally, I speak to women. You're the exception today, Aaron.
Thanks.
Generally, I speak to women, yes. But I travel all over the United States, speaking at different churches and parachurch ministries and nonprofits.
Can they find that through their website as well? So if someone that's
Absolutely.
listening, if there's a pastor that's listening, and they want to bring you to their church, or someone that wants to bring you to their women's group, they can find that
Yes.
on your website as well.
Yes, there is a speaking page with topics, a schedule, and ways to contact me.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think I'm out of questions. This has been amazing. I'm so honored. Really, I really am. This has been, you've spoken to me. Hopefully, the other two people that listen to my podcast will get something out of it as well. I'm kidding. No, I hopefully, someone else that listens, I always just pray every time I do one of these. I always pray that it lands where it was supposed to and with who it needed to land to. And so, I don't never know if that's one person or a million, or, well, I know it's not a million, but, wherever it lands, I just trust God. Like you just said with Moses, I'm not Joe Rogan. I'm not the guys in the top 10 of the podcast world, but, I don't have to be. I just have to click record. And so, but I'm so always honored because I get the opportunity to click record for people like yourself. And so thank you very much for coming on and being with us. Any last words for the audience?
Well, thank you, Aaron, for just being awesome. This has been really fun.
Good.
I would just say, if there's anybody out there listening, and maybe that's you, what I shared about reading the Bible or connecting with God, maybe that really resonated with you. If you go on my website, which is just my name, ericawiggenhorn.com, I have a free resource on there. It's called the Busy Women's Bundle. But inside that resource, there is a free ebook, and it's called 50 Days to Intimacy with God. It's not just that particular resource is not just for women. It would be very applicable to men as well. I've had several men go through it, but if that's you out there and you're like, you know what, that's me, man, I struggle to read my Bible. I don't even know the last time I read my Bible. Go download that. Take advantage of that free resource. I wrote it with you in mind because I get it, but start somewhere. Do something to take a step closer to God. He's right there. He's waiting for you. He wants to connect with you. So maybe going into a bookstore and trying to find a devotional is intimidating. Reading your Bible is just struggle bus. I get it. Go get that and start there.
Well, this has been so wonderful. And I do mean open invitation anytime you ever want to come back. So when you launch your next book, please, consider coming back, because I really appreciate and enjoy having you again. But thank you for your time. It really has meant a lot. And I appreciate the fact that hopefully somebody else heard this and realizes that, it doesn't have to be intimidating, and we can be, as you said earlier, vulnerable enough. Even if we don't want to tell anybody, we can be vulnerable enough before God to say, I don't understand your word. And you've given them a little bit of a roadmap to get started. So thank you so much. It really means a lot.
Thank you, Aaron. It was a joy to be here.
Good.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Unscripted Podcast with your host, Aaron Conrad, from his studio at the Junction in Old Hilliard. Make sure to like, share, follow, and review on your favorite podcast platforms. Also, make sure to check out my song Great and Mighty One on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you find your music. We'll see you next time on Unscripted with Aaron Conrad.